Okay, great. I'm getting my notes. I do have notes. I did practice, and my children heard me, so they had a sneak preview. I'm going to use the, I'll put it back. Okay, Andrew's very careful about his music stuff. Okay, so Pastor Seth is on vacation this week, and so he very helpfully wrote the sermon for me. He gave me an outline. I added the sports references, so you'll know what was mine. And like we talked about with the kids, today we're talking about ritual and sacraments. So not individual rituals we do by ourselves, because you can probably think about stuff you do by yourself that's a ritual. I like to make tea for myself every morning. We brush our teeth, we put our makeup on to start our day. It does give us meaning. But the rituals we're talking about today are rituals we do in a group with a thing that has an action and it means something. Wesley and I went to my nephew's graduation recently, about a month ago in Dallas, and there were 800 kids graduating. Took a long time to get through all of the names. And at the end of the ceremony, they said, okay, now take your tassel and move it from one side to the other, and that signifies that you've graduated. So all 800 kids, they moved their tassel, and it wasn't until the tassel got moved that it was like, you've done it, like you've accomplished this thing. Which is funny because my nephew actually finished his coursework in December, so I'm like, you graduated a long time ago. But it was the moving of the tassel with 800 kids that really made this graduation like complete. I go to a lot of kids' birthday parties. At a kid's birthday party, you really can't leave until there has been some kind of a cake or cupcake with a candle. The candle gets blown out, you sing happy birthday, and then it's like, okay, the birthday has happened, the party is complete, people can maybe start to leave, but these actions bring us a lot of meaning in a group using these ordinary objects. So the first time I preached, again, using an outline from Pastor Seth, I skipped the discussion question because I used to not really like doing them, but they've grown on me, so I am including a discussion question. So find someone, and what I would love to hear you guys talk about is rituals. So is there something you enjoy doing a ritual in a group, something you've done recently? It could be a sports thing. So just take a minute and talk about rituals. Okay, there's some good chatting going on. I feel like we could just chat, but I'm going to bring us back. Does anyone want to share anything they talked about? I heard a Pledge of Allegiance to a flag, very 4th of July themed. Yeah.
Part of a music group, so like somebody chooses an album every Wednesday, so that we listen to it, we go out and do research on the artist, and we come together next Wednesday and we talk about it.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, so it's in a group of people who love music, and the thing is an album, and you listen to it, and then you talk about it, right? And that's like giving you meaning and connection and building community. That's exactly it. I kept thinking more about sports rituals. I've been watching a lot of World Cup. I quit my job about a month ago, so I've watched a lot of World Cup. And Norway has this amazing ritual where the captain, oh yeah, Katie knows, she's doing it. The captain bangs on a drum, and then everybody in the audience, like the spectators and the players, they pretend like they're rowing, and then the captain bangs again, and they row some more, like a Viking ship, because they're Norwegian. And it is so powerful. You guys, like, get out your phones right now and look it up, because it is such a powerful thing to see these people in community. The object is kind of the rowing action here, but like and the drum, like this object together in community, really bringing them a lot of meaning. The U.S. men's national team has no ritual, which I think is kind of a problem for us, so we need to have our similar like Viking row. But sacraments are a sacred ritual, and what makes sacraments different from other rituals, like yes, the Norwegian row, like very powerful, but what a sacrament shows us is God's grace. It is rooting us in God's grace, and these are the most powerful rituals that we can do. And humans really long for these sacred moments. I think especially in these times when people feel disconnected and we're not always in person together, I think we really want to to touch things, to be together, to feel like we have a community, whether you're listening to music together or singing a song at a Cubs game. Like, it brings meaning and it helps you feel like you're part of a community. And I feel like if I'm invited to a graduation, if I'm invited to a wedding, so many rituals and weddings, right? Like, I want to go and be a part of this to support this milestone and the community about this important ritual. And Christians believe that God gave us these sacred rituals, which are not just traditions or like fun motions that we do, but really powerful and generous actions that remind us of God's grace. And we need that in our community. We need that reminder, and we need it over and over because it's really easy to forget about that. So Jesus highlighted 2 simple practices that we do together in ritual, and this is what we heard Eleanor read about. So again, God is using ordinary objects, pretty ordinary actions even, to emphasize that God is welcoming us in. Catholics have 7 sacraments. I know the former Catholics in the room, that's a lot. Methodists have skinnied it down to just 2, only 2. And John Wesley said there were really 3 important elements to the sacrament. The first is Christ is directing us to do these things. So in the scripture, Christ says, "Go therefore and make disciples, baptizing them." Matthew 28. He is telling us, go out and do this. And for Holy Communion, Jesus tells us, "Do this in remembrance of me," Luke 22. So the first thing is, Christ is telling us, like, you should really do these things. The second thing is, there is an outward sign, and these are the objects. The water in the baptism, not the baby. It's the water, the baby is important in Methodism. And then the bread and the cup. We have these ordinary things. It is the external sign that God uses to communicate, again, extraordinary grace. And I think the simplicity in that is really powerful. You actually, again, mom, if you're watching, you don't need a fancy dress to be baptized. You just need the water. And that simplicity in the object is, again, so powerful. And the third thing that Wesley said was that you have this outside thing, but it is showing what's happening on the inside. So it's an inward grace. And the quote from John Wesley is that a sacrament is an outward sign of an inward grace. And I did not get any slides to Andrew in time, so I'm going to repeat that because I would have put it on a slide. The sacraments are an outward sign of an inward grace. So it's the action that is pointing to how God is working through us spiritually. So the first sacrament, baptism, is beginning our journey of faith. And baptism reminds us that we are claimed by God and we didn't have to do anything for that. Again, so powerful that even the babies in the Methodist Church can be baptized. They haven't done anything. We talk a lot in our family. Babies can cry, sleep, poop. There's not a lot they can do, right? And yet they have God's grace. They can be baptized in the Methodist tradition. And not only that, but the community comes together in a baptism, and you're pledging to help raise this child or to be part of the adults' community, to be their village through that spiritual journey. God's love comes before our accomplishments. And I think, Seth, if you watch this, that needs to be a separate sermon. Also, going back to me quitting my job, it's hard for some people like me who have been so achievement-driven to think about having God's love without having to do anything. I don't have my fancy job title anymore, and I still have that grace from God, and that's what baptism reminds us about. Thank you. And adult baptism, the kids were like, oh, only babies. Adults can be baptized too. And for adults, when that happens, it can really say, this is the start of a new life. This is a new part of me. I have God's grace, and how am I going to use that in my life going forward? Another point that Seth wanted to share is that baptism doesn't mean we're perfect all of a sudden. So when you baptize a baby, it doesn't mean they're pure, they're a baby, they haven't done anything wrong. And I think that's actually really important too. It doesn't mean we have to be perfect. Another sermon, lots of sermons coming off of this one. But it does mean that we have God's grace. So baptism begins the journey, and Holy Communion nourishes us along the way. So that's the second one for Methodists. Communion is a spiritual nourishment. Like we need to eat, we need spiritual nourishment also. And communion reminds us of Christ's love, sacrifice, and ongoing presence in our lives. And again, we receive grace not because we've earned it, but because we need it and because it's there for us. So in the Methodist tradition for communion, which we normally do every week, and this week, since we have no pastor, we're not doing it. So normally we do it every week. But everyone is welcome to the table in the Methodist tradition. And just like how babies can be baptized, I think that's really amazing that the children are welcome. They come up. If you're struggling, you're welcome. If you're nailing it, you are also welcome, because everyone needs that spiritual nourishment, and you are welcome. And that grace is always being provided to us, because again, we need that reminder, no matter who you are, what stage of life you're in, and God will feed us through communion. So both of these sacraments remind us of grace. And these ordinary objects, the water, the bread, and the cup, become holy for us, and they show us that God works through ordinary things and ordinary people to provide us that grace. And it reminds us we belong to God just because we do. We don't have to do anything fancy or be anyone fancy. We belong, and we are continually nourished by God's grace. And these simple actions, these simple items remind us of that. So every baptism tells a story that we belong to God. We didn't have to do anything to get it. Every communion, every week, except this one, reminds us that God continues to nourish our spirits. And these sacraments, these sacred rituals, are the most important ones. It would be really great if the men's soccer team had one. I'm going to go back to that. We really need a ritual, you guys. We really, who are we playing on Monday? I already forgot. Belgium. We got to beat Belgium. We need something to help us beat Belgium. But the sacred rituals, the sacraments, they remind us these are the gifts of grace that shape us into the people God created us to be. Amen.